Hey folks, this is Craig here. I'm going to show you how to rebuild the Pressure Pro stabilizer. There's only a few seals in them and it's pretty simple. And there's a couple steps to it. Um, Basically, if it's leaking high pressure air into the low pressure system or side and or not regulating, then it's most likely contamination or something with a seal on the high pressure valve area. If it's leaking out a little hole on the side here or out of the cap, some of the stabilizers will vent out of the cap instead of a hole. The newer versions don't have a hole on the side. And if that's the case, then it's the O-ring around a plunger, and that's the low pressure seal. So depending on what's going on with your regulator, you may not need to rebuild the whole thing. We'll show you how to do that anyways. So on the low pressure side, I'm just going to remove this screw and get that out of there. You can also use the 3/16 Allen key to get that out. The cap is threaded in. We use a special tool to get it out of the notch, but a nickel or 5 cents will fit in there. And then put the nickel in, pair of pliers, and unscrew it that way. I'm going to use my tool. Cap should be a washer, a spring, and inside is a plunger. Sometimes they're a little difficult to get out. If you have a shop air, you can blow air into this and the plunger will come shooting out, and it makes it real easy to get out. Sometimes you can tap it and it will pop out. If not, we use a pair of long needle nose pliers. Kind of difficult to get a hold of this way. Finally. Alright, we got it. Let's see if we can get that thing to focus. There we go. So if it's leaking out of the cap or the hole on the side, it's this O-ring right here. We call that a plunger O-ring. The seal kits come pre-packaged for you. They're pretty easy to open. Just tear that back, and you can tear your O-rings out. The size of the O-ring is a 112. On these we use polyurethane. It's got really low friction. They cost a little bit more than Buna O-rings, and they'll handle nitrous oxide and CO2 a little bit better. Come on, focus. There we go. But they have a shelf life of 5 to 8 years. No matter how well you take care of this regulator, this O-ring will need to be replaced at least every 8 years. To get them off, just pinch this O-ring up, get a little loop, and it will peel right off. Okay, so that's pretty much the low pressure side. Clean this out. You use synthetic air tool oil, Dow 33. Try to avoid petroleum based oils, as they may seep into the O-ring and reduce the life of it. Get that back down there. And the small nose goes first. Use the spring to push it down. Washer, cap. Use your nickel, 5 cents, and a pair of pliers. My special tool. And lock that down. It only needs to be hand tight, not very tight. And then adjustment screw goes back in there. And I would leave this disengaged for now, just partially in there. That way your reg will be off when you start, which is a good way to keep from, I don't know, surging your equipment, and starts off with a good, safe way of doing things. Now, if it's not regulating, it's probably got a piece of Teflon tape, crap, crud, whatever, in the high pressure valve seal. If you're lucky, when you unscrew this nipple, the valve body should stay in place. There's no reason to remove this valve body unless it leaks around the top. And you can unscrew the nipple that way. Now, for sake of example, if your valve body comes unscrewed, which is there's an O-ring around here, a high pressure valve pin sticking out. Get that focus. There we go. And there's an 016 O-ring goes around the valve body. Now this is a static O-ring, so it doesn't move very much, and usually will last for a pretty long time. We also Loctite this in place, so the O-ring is a secondary measure. If the nipple gets stuck in the valve body, this metal is really thick right here, so you can take a pair of pliers and clamp onto this here. Don't worry if you scratch it or anything like that. You're not going to hurt that area because it doesn't seal on anything, and that's what that area is made for. And you can unloosen or loosen the nipple that way and get it loose for you. And that'll give you pressure access to the high pressure side. Nipple comes out, be a little spring. A little brass pin, and then on that brass pin there's a little flat disc, and that's your high pressure valve seal. Make sure everything's all clean. I like to flip them over if there's any problem with it and then put it back on. Generally a seal that has been working and then it's contaminated usually works better. It's been pressed into place, it's taken a seat, and will make your regulator more consistent. When you put a new seal in, you probably got to let it settle down for a little bit, so you know it takes a little bit for it to settle in and make the regulator more consistent. So once you get that back into place, pop this seal in first, let that fall off the pin, make sure it's flat, and there you can see through the hole. Drop your pin in, give it a little couple clicks with your finger, and it should pop into place. Take your spring, goes in there, pops in there. 2 or 3 wraps of Teflon tape. You can use Loctite. I like 5-minute clear epoxy. It's a little messy, but it'll hold 1,000 psi in an hour. So if you're in a hurry and you don't want to deal with Teflon tape, clear epoxy does a great job. We use Teflon tape because it makes it easier to remove the nipple and do any repairs. And it's also instantaneous as far as holding pressure. And then put that back into here. Screw that in, and when you tighten down this nipple, it will also tighten down the valve body. So that is how you rebuild a Pressure Pro.